so I just need to get going. So thank you. We will have a hard stop at 1 if we're not done prior to that. So anyway, we'll get you on your next thing. Hi, my name is Rick Vermicombe, on behalf of the Minneapolis Club, Tech.MN, and my group, Club Entrepreneur, welcome to our panel discussion on MNvest, the Minnesota Equity Crowdfunding System. About 20 years ago, Fortune magazine wrote a cover story about Minneapolis. At that point in time, there was an entire tier of investment banking firms that supported private offerings of $1 million or less and public offerings of $2 to $3 million. The majority of our local venture firms, including my firm, Sherpa Partners, were investing in early stage companies. Unfortunately, the local fundraising environment is radically different today. It's a complicated discussion to analyze what happened, and we'll definitely save that for another day. However, since we can't change the past, what can we do about the future? So who here is either raising money now or has raised money in the past? Raise your hand. Most everybody. It's really hard, isn't it? To say the least, it's really hard. Anyway, we're here to help. Tech.MN serves a high-tech ecosystem in its early-stage ventures. Club Entrepreneur and my firm, Vermicombe & Associates, support folks like you with your entrepreneurial endeavors. In our efforts to provide actionable content, Tech.MN and Club Entrepreneur offer you today's panel. So with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Jeff Pesic. Jeff is co-founder of Tech.MN, Minnesota's high-tech news source. Please welcome Jeff Pesic.
Morning, everyone. How are you? Afternoon now, technically. My name is Jeff Pesic. I'm a co-founder of Tech.MN. We are a digital media company. I've been blogging about technology, doing events here in the Twin Cities for over 5 years now. And it's a pleasure to be on stage and talking about such a timely, relevant topic to entrepreneurship and business in the state of Minnesota. One of the things that we look for every day in our mission, this is my partner Mike Bollinger right there, the video when I say we, is we look for things that have the potential to move the dial for business in Minnesota. We have a vested interest in the success of the technology ecosystem here, as well as the broader business community at large. So when Zach Robbins, who I'll introduce here momentarily, came to me and said, I have an idea about how we can lubricate the wheels, do more business, do more transactions, support entrepreneurs in the state, I had to listen. So fast forward a month or two, and at short notice we put this panel together to talk about MNvest and what it could mean for the potential for business and commerce in the state of Minnesota. Thank you again for your time. I'll introduce our panelists, and also we'll welcome any questions from the audience as we go through this session. Zach Robbins here on my left. He's a corporate securities attorney with the law firm of Winthrop and Weinstein. Zach has previous experience both as a small business owner and an investment banker. Together with his colleague Ryan, who is in the back there, along with the help of many other people in the business community, they have formed MNvest to legalize equity crowdfunding in Minnesota and pave the way for a more vibrant statewide economy. Next to Zach is Gordon Birch. He's an assistant professor, information and decision sciences at the Carlson School of Management here at the University of Minnesota. Gordon focuses on the economic evaluation of information systems. He employs empirical analysis rooted in econometrics and field experimentation to identify and quantify the drivers of individual behaviors online. He's considered an expert in the areas of crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, social media, and word of mouth. His work now primarily focuses on econometrics and randomized field experiments. Can't wait to hear more about that. Thank you. Next to Gordon is Katie Jasper. Katie's the CEO of Prescribed Nutrition. Katie co-founded an interactive online whole food-based nutrition and education company, Prescribed Nutrition, which currently serves an online audience from all over the world. Prescribed Nutrition recently raised $40,000 in crowdfunding through Indiegogo. We're here to hear more about that and talk about what her future is for the platform as an entrepreneur. Next to Katie, we have Senator Terry Bonham. Senator Bonham represents District 44, which includes northern parts of Minnesota, much of Plymouth and Woodland. She began her legislative career by winning the Senate in a special election in 2005. In November 2012, she won re-election to the Minnesota Senate for the third time. She serves as the chair of the Higher Education Workforce Development Committee, Jobs and Ag, Rural Development, E12 Budget Division, and a Legacy Subcommittee. Her special legislative interests include education policy, finance reform, state government redesign, business and commerce issues. She has private sector background as a marketing executive at both Tonka Toys and Power Corporation. Thank you, Karen. And farthest from me, Marshall Saunders. Marshall spent 12 years as a residential real estate agent, and in 2008 he bought into a RE/MAX Results franchise 3 weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed. During the midst of the greatest housing crisis probably we've all experienced, he not only survived but thrived. He grew the team from 450 to over 900. Just last month, Saunders sold his interest in that RE/MAX franchise in order to launch SaundersDaily.com, where accredited investors can pool resources to buy real estate assets. He's working on a number of additional sites, which include one that will help corporations make community-minded real estate investments, and another, he says, will offer true real estate crowdfunding for the masses. Thank you, Marshall. So a round of applause for our panelists for being here today.
So Jeff, just to complicate things, we're having some technology problems, so we have a little mic that you all can pass back and forth.
Oh, really?
You're good, but those, I guess, are not working very well.
All right, let's look through that. Again, I encourage you here today to ask questions, engage in dialogue as we go through this. I moderated a number of panels before. The best ones I've had were ones where the audience got the information that they came for. So I encourage you to raise your hand and speak out if you have something to say or something to offer to the conversation. It's designed to be educational in nature. And if it isn't clear, full disclosure, my bias, again, is I like to see business happen here in the state. And so the context and the questions that are prepared are framed from that point of view. So that's my inherent bias as the moderator here. So let's start off with just a very simple overview. I'm going to ask the question to Zach next to me as you kind of catalyze this, the reason we're here, frankly. High level, what does interesting equity crowdfunding mean to you?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. And by the way, there are many of us that are involved in gotten this off the ground, namely my colleague Ryan. There's plenty of folks in the crowd like Lois and like Chris, Senator Bonoff, who helped us get to the point that we're at right now, which is that we're all here in this room talking about this, which is very exciting. What is intrastate crowdfunding? Not to spend too much time on this, but in 2012, Congress passed the Jobs Act. Two critical components to the Jobs Act, Title II and Title III, which legalized equity crowdfunding, meaning the masses could invest in companies online. That was a radical change from where we were, which was basically a system structured as a response to the crash of 1929, and which then spawned the 1933 and 34 Acts. And from that point on, it's been very challenging, as many of you know in this room, to try to raise private capital. There's all sorts of restrictions, and it's very difficult to do so. So many of us were very excited to see the Jobs Act pass in 2012. Congress forced the SEC to act in 270 days. And now we are about 920 days later, and the SEC has not acted on Title III of the Jobs Act. Title III of the Jobs Act authorized equity crowdfunding for 100% of investors, not just the 1% of accredited investors, but the other 99%. In the meantime, they have authorized Title II, which is equity crowdfunding for the 1%, and I'll let Marshall tell you a bit about that, because that will be his first platform we'll be going after that crowd. So, to then pivot, what is interstate equity crowdfunding? Basically, states in the meantime have been pissed off, for lack of a better term, so they've gotten together one by one to pass their own intra-state equity crowdfunding laws, which essentially allows for a company located in that state to raise capital from investors located within that state. Clearly, the transaction is not crossing state boundaries. States have the authority to do so. Right now, there are 13 states that have authorized equity crowdfunding, namely Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana. Texas just went live a few weeks ago. So we hope to become state 14. Terry Bonoff is our sponsor in the Senate, and we're going to be talking a bit more about the bill today. So that's my background on the issue. Thank you.
Sure. Senator Bonoff, what inspired you to sponsor this bill?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. It's exciting to be a chief author of a bill that has so much organized support behind it, and that does give me optimism as to the bill's fate. But why I chose to do it, it starts with Zach. Zach and Ryan asked me to have breakfast with them. I'm Zach's state senator. And they shared about the opportunity, and instantly it clicked for me. I remembered when my girlfriend up at our cabin has a theater, Comet Theater up in Cook, and she had the oldest running theater that still used 60 millimeter film. And she was told by just a few months she needed to convert to digital, and it was going to cost her $68,000. And she was like, Comet's going to close. There's no way I can raise that. And she went on to Kickstarter, and she raised $70,000 within like 6 weeks. And so my eyes opened at that point to what is possible with this, opportunity to be able to raise money through the internet. And then I connected it to the behavior of my own grown adult children. And when if I owe them something, I write them a check, and my son takes the check and he takes a picture of it and he says, well, I deposited that. Really? I mean, that was new to me. So I understand that the millennial generation's habits and behaviors and practices are much different than investors of yesterday, and that the public actually is already there because they're doing it when you can raise $70,000 in an instant on a Kickstarter. And so when I learned that there was actually the opportunity to access capital for small businesses, of which I believe is our critical link in not only just continuing to emerge strong from this recession, but in leading our nation. I know how important the tech sector is and the entrepreneurship potential, and yet I am continuing to hear about how tight capital is. And so to me, this was, they say there's never a magic bullet. This may not be that, but this is certainly an important tool that for Minnesota to continue to lead, we had to have access to. And so I welcome the opportunity and look forward to working with those of you in this room to make sure that that becomes a reality.
Thank you. Marshall, could you explain the difference between the crowdfunding that we have now, such as Indiegogo and Kickstarter, and what equity-based interstate crowdfunding means?
Well, equity-based crowdfunding is you actually own a part of the product. My website, it buys multifamily residential houses, so apartment buildings, anything over 5 units. We set up a separate LLC that only owns that particular piece of property, and then we put that on our website, and you can go to our website, you can look at the property, you can look at photos, you can download the prospectus, and then you can invest in it. A minimum of about $3,000.
All virtually?
That's right, all virtually. We actually have showings. We do investor showings and stuff like that so that you can actually come up and see the property. But you can do it completely online. And what it allows is for local ownership. At 3 o'clock today, I'm going to see this building, and we're looking at buying it, and it's on Grand Avenue. And it's gorgeous. It's fantastic. Hardwood floors, perfect, apartment. And right now that's owned by a REIT in New Jersey. Nothing against REITs or New Jersey or anything like that. But the problem is when that apartment makes a profit, then that profit leaves us. It goes out of our community. What I want to do is I want to have this be community-based funded. And so that people who, if it's on Grand Avenue, people who live in Highland Park and Crocus Hill and Summit Avenue and Mac Groveland and Lexham, they can all buy a little piece of that apartment. So that every day we have hundreds of owners driving by that apartment building, caring about it, caring about the neighborhood, and when that does create a profit, it's more likely to be spent locally. So that they go to Salute Restaurant or the Caribou and Brand or Lululemon or wherever I spend a fortune on my kids' clothing and all that. But
And it keeps some of that profit local. And then that creates a better neighborhood, that creates more successful business, that creates more investment, and thus the investment that you own in that neighborhood gets to be made worth more. That's our concept.
It's currently for accredited investors.
Right, it's only accredited investors. Right now we have another platform that we have ready to go or ready to modify once we get either state or federal kind of rules that we can live by.
What's the simple definition of accredited investor?
$200,000 individual income, $300,000 household income, or $1 million net worth, not counting your primary residence.
Okay.
It's either or, any of those can be met. There's a few other things. You have to have had that income for at least 2 years. You have to sign off that you have all reasonable expectations that that income will continue for another year. You know, there's little caveats to that. But in a nutshell, 200 individual, 300 household, $1 million net worth.
Right. And then, so just to be clear, what we're referring to here with MNvest and interstate crowdfunding is specifically for non-accredited investors, which would be essentially anyone, right?
Everybody.
So it would be for both non-accredited and accredited. The caps, which we can talk a bit about now or later, would apply to non-accredited investors. So if a company seeks to raise capital from an accredited investor, it wouldn't count towards any state caps.
Sure. And how do you think this kind of differs from the approach that entrepreneurs and investors are taking right now in terms of private placements and fundraising in the capital market for startups?
Well, as many of you probably know, it's very challenging. You either have to raise the capital on your own, or you have to go through a broker-dealer. And both options are fine for the status quo, but I mean, how incredible would it be if you could then post your offering online, either through a DD platform or through a non-DD platform, and be able to access investors from the entire state. I mean, right now, if you have an offering, you're going to reach out to friends, family, you're going to try your best to connect to other people, but truly, how big is your network? And it's not like you can jump on Facebook right now or LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm trying to raise this amount of cash. That is against the law. So if this law passes, you will then be able to post your offering online, and literally anyone from any part of the state could access it. If there's someone in the northwest corner of the state and they happen to have a keen interest in nanotech devices and that is your company, you are connecting, this platform could connect to people who would have never connected, before. And that is the true power of this bill.
That's the promise, right? Katie, could you talk a little bit about your experience as an entrepreneur in crowdfunding and the path you took and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really exciting, learning the rest of you as to what's going on in this space. So I'm like, okay, I'm counting the minutes still, because it is a really big challenge. I co-founded a business, one other partner, and it's really a bandwidth issue for us. And so where we took it to something like a crowdfunding platform, ours was Indiegogo, was really to not only gain some excitement, but to reach the masses in a platform that allowed us, from a time perspective, to raise a certain amount of funds in a short amount of time. And that's what we're always up against, the clock. And so now, having gone through that and successfully raised $40,000, we're in a friends and family, just as you're talking about, and it's a really incredible, I'll use that word, but it's a daunting process, absolutely. And we have a lot of things that we want to bring to market, and every little conversation involves us trying to get our message out, share our passion, and it's that one-on-one connection, which I think is, one, really great, but two, we are in an era where we're using platforms, we're using social media, and to be able to kind of get only so far down the path, if you're saying you can't say what you're investing to a large amount of people, is kind of prohibitive. And so this is really exciting for us because we are definitely, we're bootstrapped, and so we're definitely pounding the pavement when it comes to trying to raise a larger round of capital.
Sure. Gordon, you've been patiently quiet. Here's your perspective as an academic and somebody who studies this, a little qualitative, quantitative. What's your take on the interstate crowdfunding trend that you're seeing across the country?
Sure. I think actually it's important to kind of back up a second and just talk in general about crowdfunding and the industry landscape and how it works. We've been talking about two types of crowdfunding here, reward-based and equity-based. So Indiegogo is a reward-based platform, although they do allow for donation-based as well, versus the equity-based platform where you are buying a piece of the company. There are also loan-based platforms, which is important to keep in mind that that is an option. So Prosper and Lending Club, you can basically raise money for debt, so you make interest repayments over time to repay those people. My interest has been sort of spanning all of these different flavors of crowdfunding. And the reason that it's important to look at all of them and be careful about the interchangeability of them is that there are very different incentives to providing money to somebody depending on the type of crowdfunding you're doing. So as a contributor or investor, depending on what platform you're using, you might call it something different. You're either expecting some monetary return, a physical item if it's a product pre-order on a reward-based platform, or getting a piece of a company. And the long-term potential returns for each of those things are very different. So if I buy a product from you on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, you give me back maybe a material item and then I'm done with you. If I have a loan with you, I'm going to get interest over a number of months after that. If I buy a piece of your company and you are very successful, my returns are proportional to your returns. Right? So it's important to think about all those things. So we spent some time thinking about how these different incentives drive people to be more or less likely to get money in a different setting, or one setting or another, rather. To date, most of the research that I have been doing has been in the reward-based and donation-based spaces, although I currently have some ongoing projects looking at some equity platforms that involve unaccredited investors in other countries. Right? So the U.S. is one of the main places where this is highly restricted because of what happened in the Great Depression era and things, as you were talking about earlier, Zach. But for instance, in the UK, this is already legal and going on. So we're seeing some important insights that are coming from that context, where we're being very successful and there aren't really very many hiccups that are happening. So the concerns that are coming up from FINRA and the SEC around federal legislation, they're kind of calling into question where are these coming from if they're having these problems in other regions. So that's my perspective. I think there's huge potential here for democratized access to capital for everybody. And the concerns that have been raised today federally, I'm not seeing a lot of support or evidence for those things.
The concern is raised federally. What do you mean by that?
I mean, so the SEC sort of implicitly dragged its feet around implementing some of these laws because they don't like the law, they don't like the legislation.
You think that's why?
I think so. I mean, that's of course my opinion, not the university of Minnesota's opinion. But that is mine.
Why would the SEC not like this?
There's a fear about the prevalence of fraud and things like that. So the whole reason these laws, securities acts in the 1930s exist is that there's a concern, snake oil salesmen and people basically going for a run and taking everybody's money and walking off with it. They're worried that's going to happen. So why kill these laws and reverse them if this might just happen again?
Sounds like the past 10 years.
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
High finance.
Okay.
It's a thought as somebody who has worked in the investment space and experienced it from the inside out and remembers the day when Lehman Brothers stopped answering the phone and when Bear Stearns collapsed and everything else that came thereafter. So it's interesting perspective to think that we're talking about enabling people, democratizing capital from peer-to-peer as we are here, and yet you have a large federal regulatory body that is in limbo, right, on that note. So, Zach, what's the status of this right now as far as we know? What's the process that you see from MNvest moving forward in Minnesota?
Sure. We've made a ton of progress, once again, due to the help of many others. The first thing I would suggest that you do is visit MNvest.org, MNvest.org. You'll see a brief description of what we're trying to do. You'll see a link to the bill. You will see all of our sponsors and supporters at the bottom, like Tide, like the Data Bank, like many groups who have said, yes, this makes sense. And so far, no one has opposed us, which is great. This is a rare bipartisan issue. Right now, in addition to Senator Bonham, we have Senator Brandon Peterson, a Republican, as a second sponsor of the bill. We have Senator Metzen, who jumped on board yesterday. He's chair of the Senate Commerce committee. We have in the House a Republican and a Democrat apiece, and Representative Loon and Representative Joe Atkins. We have Rep. John Applebaum in the building, who I know would like to get involved. So, long story short, we're making a ton of progress. The game plan here is to introduce the bill in mid-December and then hold hearings in January, so that we can pass this before, things start to turn ugly at the Capitol, which could happen. So that's a bit of where we're at. We would love for all of you to go to the website to sign the petition. We would love to discuss with you if any of your employers would like to support us, or any trade groups that you are involved in. And of course, if you are friendly with your senator or House rep, please consider contacting them as well.
So how would you break down the nuts and bolts of the legalese?
Sure. So the latest draft of the bill was finalized last Thursday. It's a continuous process. It will continue to change. We feel that we struck a nice balance between allowing companies to raise capital and to access as many people as possible, but then at the same time to be able to protect consumers. Right now, if you're a non-accredited investor, you're capped at $10,000 invested in these offerings within a 12-month period. In the latest draft of the bill, companies can raise up to $2 million without an audit, or up to $5 million with. So we've been continuing to accept input from anyone, be it representatives, be it businesses, so forth. We have a meetup group called Equity Crowdfunding MN, and we met at Day Block a few weeks ago and received input from many folks who said, look, we need to raise the caps on the companies. So taking that input and having it increase caps.
As we go through again, please, if you have questions.
Actually, what just got raised here, I think, is a very important point, which is the protection for the consumer. In theory, if you have a professional money-raising outfit, they've done diligence, which means that, in a sense, they checked out, and hopefully they established that where they're raising money for is not a crook. That's the theory of it. When you go into a crowdfunding scenario, I'm assuming that, for the most part, there's no vetting mechanism. And will you end up having the equivalent of a trustee or something like that, where people voluntarily submit to some, I'm just sort of curious, how do we come up with some sort of equivalent of diligence for a more open fundraising scenario? You understand the question?
Absolutely. That's a great question and a key component to the bill. And I'm not going to bore you with the exact details. I'm not going to read through the clause right now, but every offering will need to have a prospectus. And the prospectus will need to include vital info such as company name, phone number, executive officers, background on management, entire business plan, statements if they have them, whether or not any of the executives have been in trouble with the law, how much the company is seeking to raise, the minimum amount of capital that the company would need to be able to close on the round. That's important because a critical component to this bill is escrow. We want to make sure that the funds are going in escrow up until the point that the company reaches its goal. This is borrowed from Kickstarter. And so the escrow plus the prospectus plus some other sort of details within the bill, we think will strike that nice balance between making sure that the investor knows what they're going to invest in, but at the